Great. So I'm Megan Bernhardt. I'm a senior advisor for international trade and standards at the Department of Energy in our Office of International Affairs. And I've been chairing the U.S. tag to the ISO TC82 SC7 on sustainable mining and mine closure for, I think, under a year now, but so still rapidly getting up to speed on the topic in the group. Next slide. So the stated mission of TC82 SC7 is to develop international standards and complementary documents, which when applied will prevent and mitigate long-term mining impacts and create environmental and socioeconomic value through the mine closure and reclamation management process. The TC82 SC7 really covers a broad scope of sustainability aspects across the entire mining life cycle, including environment and social impacts and community beneficiation, climate change impacts, community participation and consultation, circular economy aspects, and transparency of mining operations. So a pretty broad scope. However, specifically excluded from this scope is occupational health and safety aspects related to workplace activities, which is already covered under ISO TC 283, risk management guidance, industrial waste treatment and reuse, and machinery, which is covered in the broader TC82 on mining. Next slide. There's really broad geographic participation, and it's been kind of recently expanding. I think 5 countries have joined as participating members in the past like 6-month period. So there's currently 25 participating members and 11 observers. And there's also several international organizations that are serving as liaisons to TC82 SC7, including the Environmental Coalition on Standards, or ECOS, the European Federation of Geologists, the International Council on Mining and Metals, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, or IRMA, and the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO. Next slide. So TC82 SC7 falls under the broader TC82, which covers mining broadly. I'd say TC82 is mostly focused on technology and machinery for mining. And it's important to note that from 2013, TC82 SC7 has been developing standards for mine closure and reclamation management. However, in 2023, the group broadened the scope through a resolution to address all environment, social, and government aspects in line with ISO's commitment to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So then it started covering the whole mining life cycle versus just mine closure and reclamation. And the US was not participating in TC82 SC7 prior to this broadening of scope. However, recognizing the geopolitical importance of US participation of this broader scope with support from State Department and now the Department of Energy, the US formed a US Technical Advisory Group in 2025. So we're still really building out US participation. Korea is the current secretariat and Australia is the chair. And under TC82 SC7, there's currently 3 task forces, which are specialized working groups that are created to address specific technical or policy issues. So they're not necessarily developing a standard, but they're developing like reports on direction of standardization in ISO. And then there's also 3 active working groups with standards under development currently. And these include a standard on social aspects, one on underground mine tailings backfill, and the third is on finding value in mine waste, and that's the most recent addition. Next slide. TC82 SC7 also has 5 standards that have already been published, noting that these are published prior to the broadening of scope, so they're mostly focused on just the mine closure and reclamation aspects of mining or sustainable mining. Next slide. So now I'll go through the current standards that are under development, which is really where we need to start broadening the US participation. So the first one, again, is Working Group 4 on social aspects. The scope of this standard addresses 5 main themes, which are stakeholder participation, impacts and opportunities for communities in mining areas. Community identity is tied to places, so things like culture, livelihood, value, impacts. The transition to mining communities, and that addresses workforce, land use, and economics, and resourcing for resilience, which covers the liabilities for environmental harm and social transitions. This is chaired by Australia, I believe. Yes, and um, the the current status of this, there's a committee draft that's been registered at the committee level, so it's now left the working group level, and the committee level consultation has already started. I'd say the US, since we were kind of late to joining, we, I think, have some participation and have provided some comments at the committee level draft. And we did have US attendance at the last meeting, which was back in April. Next slide. And then working group 5 covers underground mine tailings and backfill. This one is currently in the preparatory stage, so it's actively meeting, and they're still working on comments on an initial draft. And there's 3 US experts that are registered to participate in this working group. And the last meeting was quite recent, May 17th in Beijing, and there were US experts that attended both in person and virtually. This standard has 3 primary objectives. The first is standardized methods and procedures for the operation and management of underground mine tailings backfill. The second is to develop tools or standardized tools for enterprises and regulatory authorities, including things like backfill system design, method selection, operational management, cost estimation, and environmental audits. And then the third is to support the sustainable use of tailings through underground backfill. And this one is chaired by China. Next slide. And then the most recent development is working group 6, which is the value of discarded natural materials in mining. This one is chaired by Australia. It's currently in the preparatory stage and it's actively meeting. It's still working on the first draft of the standard. The last meeting, I should say, met in April, and there was US participation. However, we're still really building out US expert participation in this space. We had someone from ANSI and the Environmental Protection Agency participate, but neither of them are able to be kind of full expert participants in this working group. It's important to note that the EU also voted for this to be included in their Vienna Agreement, which basically facilitates the development of standards between the EU and ISO by allowing the parallel approval of both the ISO standard and at the European SEN level, really with the goal of harmonizing the two. And this standard is really kind of unique, and it's aiming to achieve a paradigm shift from treating materials as inherently waste and thus a liability. And it's looking more proactively to what byproducts from mining could be used for in the future. So it's aimed at encouraging mining operators to adopt a life cycle approach for sustainable raw materials. And the stated purpose is to standardize methods for characterizing and determining economic value of mine waste material, understanding the potential secondary resources for reuse or recovery throughout mining operations, aligning the management of these materials with circular economy principles, and evaluation of value in materials with environmental liability, really aiming to contribute to a life cycle approach in the management of abandoned mine sites. Next slide. So those are the 3 standards that are currently under development in TC82 SD7. In addition, there's 3 task forces. The first is to revise the strategic plan for the subcommittee. That one hasn't really been active yet. However, myself and ANSI are both registered as participants and are actively tracking. They're waiting currently for the TC82 broader technical committee to update its strategic plan. And based on our conversations with the Australian chair, we believe this will start to kick off in the early fall or early next year. The second task force is on maintenance of tailing storage facilities. This one hasn't really been active yet. We're tracking it, but currently no U.S. experts are participating. And the same thing with the Task Force 7 on mine wastewater monitoring and assessment. Next slide. So I just wanted to show that beyond, the standards that are being developed within TC82, SC7, they're also liaising with or participating in several other ISO technical committees that kind of overlap in some of the areas, such as, the one that John just presented on lithium, TC333, and 298 on rare earth, as well as TC323 on circular economy, and some of the more environmental management system, environmental impact technical committees. So liaisons between ISO committees are, really developed to ensure that common interests are being addressed by the correct committees and the right experts are involved in the standards development. They're established to share information and expertise, facilitate stakeholder engagement, and ensure that consensus is reached by incorporating relevant perspectives from other technical bodies, and to really help to ensure that there's not duplication between the different technical committees and the standards that they're developing. Next slide. I just wanted to share so through our participation in TC82 SC7, we learned about a related item because this group presented to the TC82 SC7 group, and the information was shared through TC82 SC7, which was under the TC308, which is chain of custody. There was a proposal under that group to develop a copper chain of custody standard, but it also was focused on copper, but also broadly to critical minerals. And when we learned about this, there was some, I'd say, concerns from our stakeholders in the US that there is already, existing standards in this space being developed. So our US tag did not support this effort moving forward. So under TC82 SC7, we kind of organized ourselves and we wrote letters to the other members of TC82 SC7 that also were participating in 308, kind of sharing some of our concerns. And ultimately, this proposal was not approved. However, they did form an ad hoc group, or ad hoc group 5, to kind of do a study on critical mineral traceability and produce a report on what ISO should do in the traceability of critical minerals moving forward. And under this, there was a call for leadership, and we put forth one of our TCD2 SC members, Alicia, who is at the Colorado School of Mines, and we were able to win that vote, and now the US, or Alicia, is the convener for this ad hoc group 5. So that gives us more of a role, or Alicia more of a role in kind of shaping the outcomes of that report. Although, I mean, the convener is mutual, but it gives us a little bit more insight into the participation and development. So that's something that we're tracking closely. Next slide. So the next meeting of TC82 SC7 is likely to be in the early fall. The location is likely Geneva, but still being determined, and it will be held, I think, jointly as a plenary with TC82. There's continued need to build out US participation. Like I mentioned, we just formed the US tag for TC82 SC7 about a year ago, so we're still really looking for experts to help us participate and shape these standards. And currently the US tag is meeting quarterly, but sometimes We have additional meetings or emails to respond to when there's kind of focused information to share or reviews active. And next slide. So for anyone interested in participating in TC82SC7, my contact information is on the slide. And if you reach out to me, myself and ANSI will work to make sure that you can become a member of the US tag. And that's all I have. Thank you.